Thank you. Just before the conference actually started, I mean, I had a few words with Professor Ward. So, I mean, actually, let me introduce him because, I mean, I'm just reading through his bio. It's very, very impressive as such anyway. So, Professor Rupert Ward is a former special advisor to the royal household and project lead of IDA, one of the world's most successful free educational technologies. Author of Personalized Learning for the Learning Person and Getting Personal, How We Learn and Why We Don't. He is a National Teaching Fellow and Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. He co-authored the University of Huddersfield highly successful assessment and feedback strategy and has been part of teams recognized nationally 7 times in 7 years, right? In areas including enterprise, customer service excellence, student experience, and assessment and feedback, all with high commendations. An avid learner, he's currently completing his 8th postgraduate qualification across a range of disciplines. Now, that's an example of lifelong learning. Rupert is Professor of Learning, Innovation, and Associate Dean International within the School of Computing and Engineering at the University of Huddersfield. He is a member of the British Computer Society Accreditation Committee, a former elected board member of the UK Council of Professors and Heads of Computing, a fellow of the British Computer Society, a chartered engineer, a chartered manager, and a chartered IT professional. Really, I mean, there's nothing else I can actually add to his CV, but to say that his title today is Learning Fitness, Getting Learning Fit. Professor Ward, over to you for your keynote address.
Thank you. So the last bit to put on the keynote is on the CV is a keynote speaker at this conference. So that's the most important bit for now. So thank you, Professor Nair. Thank you to colleagues there that have been supporting me getting ready for this conference. Dr. Blewett, for example, but particularly Dr. Singh, who's been working endless hours trying to get this conference organized in difficult times. So thank you all, I really appreciate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into my presentation in a minute, but what I'd like you to do is, as I'm going through it, please do put comments and questions in the chat, and we hopefully should have a decent amount of time at the end of the presentation for us to go through those. I want this to be an interactive session and for you to learn as much as possible about learning fitness. So I'll go through the concepts and then we can discuss further at the end. So Professor Nair was, let me just get my slides working. There you go. Right. So Professor Nair was talking about the role of nature and nature having powers much stronger than we do, and so what I wanted to start my talk with discussing was the area where within nature we differ most from our fellow animals, and that's within our brains. So what our brains allow us to do, which no other animal is able to do, is that we're able to rationalize. And the reason we're able to rationalize is we have an area developed in our brain at the front here called the prefrontal cortex. And that allows us to store information in a way that is rationally organized and enables us to make rational decisions. Now, our prefrontal cortex, unfortunately, only makes up about 30% of our brain, and the rest is our natural evolutionary inheritance. It's the brain wiring that leads to our default emotions and behaviors. And many of these emotions and behaviors are reactive behaviors. They're reactions of us to our immediate opportunities and threats within the environment. So you can see very simple examples of this in relation to the pandemic. people exhibit certain behaviors. For example, panic buying shopping, or ways in which people react unusually to either being locked down or to interactions with others. And so the way we act is in many cases not always aligned to our long-term interests. And in fact, in a lot of situations in life, it's irrational. And so what this talk is going to consider is how, when we've got this natural baggage, when we've got this natural way of behaving that is in large part irrational and evolutionarily programmed into us, how do we accommodate that in how we can learn most effectively? And in particular, how can we think about how we can reprogram that to some extent by getting learning fit? So if we think about fitness from a physical perspective, when we undertake fitness, we have a set of exercise habits that we get into. We have a level of motivation that impacts on our ability to exercise, and we develop a certain level of mastery in undertaking those exercises. And one of the most effective ways to become physically fit is through having personal tuition, through having a personal trainer. And the personal trainer's role here is to explain the equipment and the exercises that we're going to use, to then personalize those activities to our individual needs and capabilities, but also to our habits and to our motivations. And through these, we are expected to develop mastery. And this mastery is also influenced, as per the pandemic, by how we engage with our environment. So if in the lockdown, for example, that we've experienced in the UK, you've had lots of people that have not been exercising at all. You have some people that have been exercising exactly the same as they were when we weren't in lockdown, and you have some people in the middle that are exercising a bit, but not as much as they were. Okay, and part of that difference there is to do with their levels of mastery of their own physical exercise regimes. So if you've got mastery, if you've got that development, that capability to be able to be your own personal trainer, to understand how to exercise yourself, then you can be more effective in staying physically fit. And flipping that to a learning context, if you have the ability to understand how to learn in your education, then you can enable yourself to maintain and develop your learning fitness. And we've seen during the pandemic, this shift to online learning at pace has been challenging. It's been challenging in schools, in universities. It's been challenging for us all. And there's lots of different factors in there. One of them is a lot of systems have really not been set up to move to that sort of environment at pace. So we're learning on the job. People don't necessarily have the skills and capabilities to be able to do this. But it's if we look at it back in the physical fitness example, what happened in the physical fitness example in the UK, for example, is we had people offering fitness classes on television or online. We had companies setting up personal training systems online so that we could try and provide a way of people staying physically fit remotely. And similarly, in terms of education, we've had a lot more access to online learning facilities that were already there, and we've tried to accommodate within education a move to online with teachers, lecturers providing that personal training for education. And we are missing at the moment, quite clearly missing, the physical presence of those lecturers, those teachers within the classrooms and within the lecture theatres, because it is easier generally to interact with education, with learning, like it is with physical fitness, when you have somebody with you. And so the question then is, well, okay, in the situation we're in now, how can we enable learning to be most effective? How can we provide a situation where actually that challenge of not being in the same room is minimized? And so what we're really trying to do here is maximize our ability to learn online, learning fitness online, as we are currently also trying to maximize how we get physically fit online. And if we can do this online, when we get back to a situation, hopefully in 2021, where we can start, I can start coming and visiting you at the conference in South Africa, rather than being stuck here in Manchester, then we'll be in a situation where we can go back to those interactions physically and that learning physically, but we have much better quality online learning, a much better understanding of that online learning. So we can optimize our learning fitness online and then actually take that through and optimize our learning fitness offline as well. And I've talked a lot about the concept of learning fitness, and I'm now going to explain in detail both the principles behind it and some of the theory and the content that underpins it. So the first part of learning fitness is to consider our learning diet. What is it that we consume when we are being educated? And as Professor Nair highlighted at the beginning, I'm probably a bit of a compulsive eater here. Okay, I'm on my 8th postgraduate qualification. I've done a lot of learning, probably more than is healthy for anybody, to be honest. But when we're doing learning, when we're engaging with learning, we need to really think through some simple questions. And the questions are things like, is what we're consuming healthy? Is it good for us? And I'm going to touch on that very shortly. Does it enable us to get learning fit? So is it enabling content for us to actually make progress? Or conversely, does it give us indigestion? So does it create learning barriers? Or does it adversely impact on our physical or mental health? Okay, and these are important considerations which are rarely actually discussed within educational circles. So to answer these questions, we need to think about how we react to our learning environment, how we engage with learning. And in fact, we need to understand how we learn. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes going through learning theory and talking through about how it works. And basically, it works like most of our natural systems do, which is it works on us engaging with our environment, assessing opportunities and threats, success and failure opportunities, and reacting to them. So let me talk you through the diagram I've got up here, and we can hopefully then get a sense of how we all learn. So the bit at the top, the sensory input, is how we sense information from our environment. So we get information coming in, and we then process that information. So learning really is an information process and filing system. It's the easy way to see it. So the information comes in, and the first stage it goes into is what's known as sensory memory. And when it gets into sensory memory, it's there for a very short period of time. And what it's doing there is it's making an immediate assessment on the environment that we're in and the information we're getting from that environment. And the reason this immediate assessment is done is because it's then quickly and hardwired in that we can react to that input. So this is our famous fight or flight response. So what this does is it allows us to make impulsive decisions, quick impulsive decisions without thinking about them. Okay, so we literally react. And in times gone by, hopefully not very much these days, if you were in a threatening situation, this can save your life. It can allow you to make that decision before you've had time to really assess the situation in detail. So it's a useful evolutionary skill, but one that in most of our lives now is not that useful, and in fact is very harmful in a lot of context, because it's still there and we're perceiving threats coming in through our sensory input that we are reacting to in the same way, when if we looked at it rationally, we wouldn't do. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute. So let's assume we get some input in from our environment, some information coming in, and there's not an immediate threat. What happens is the information then goes into our working memory, which is like our in-tray on a desk. So we've got an in-tray on our desk, and we've got a filing cabinet, which is our brain. So the information comes in, it goes into the in-tray, and we have a maximum amount of information we can put into that in-tray. So we've got a maximum cognitive load. And that information then we take and we start to understand how it connects with what's already in our filing cabinet. And we start thinking about how we're going to file that information. And that process of filing is actually quite a slow one. So it starts straight away, but it can take days or even weeks to fully process information. And in fact, we do a lot of our information filing when we're asleep. So having a good sleep pattern is really important to allow you enough time to make effective connections within your brain. So let's assume that's all working well. You're not under threat. You're sleeping properly. So you're getting information in. It's not overwhelming your cognitive load. And then that information then gets filed in your filing cabinet in your long-term memory. So the information gets filed in two main blocks and in four main ways. So the blocks on the left, the system one, the implicit memory. This is memories that we have very little control and agency over. So the first of these is emotional memories. We can't really control what emotional memories we store. And the second one there is procedural memories. Now, procedural memories are habits. So things like driving a car becomes a procedural memory. So it becomes something that you can automatically do. So system one is automatic responses. System two, the explicit system on the right here, is things where we have more agency, more control over it. So there's two bits in there. The first bit is episodic memory, which is about events. So it's about recording information to do with events. And an important point here, both for episodic memory and for our other memories, is that when we record this information, we record snippets of information. We record patterns of information. We don't record a full and complete recording. So if you've gone to to a conference, okay, you won't have a video recording of that entire conference in your brain. It's simply too large a file size to accommodate in your filing cabinet. So what we do is we compress the files. And we compress the files by just storing the key bits of information to do with that event. So if you're asked to recollect, to reconstruct that information afterwards, so to decompress the file, what you get out is not entirely accurate. And it's why, for example, when they have court cases and they ask for witnesses to confirm what's going on, that's never 100% certain. There is a lot of situations where people think that one thing has happened when something else has actually happened. Okay, so it's important that you understand that your brain isn't this, this perfect system that will store information perfectly. And what we're really hoping for is a overall level of patterns and connections within there that give a good representation of reality in most cases. Okay, so that's what we're trying to get to. And then the far bit on the right here, the semantic memory, is where we connect bits of information together. Okay, so we do that in two ways. We do it between existing bits of information and new bits of information, and we do it in terms of a hierarchy, an overview, a understanding of a system of information together. So connecting the information between new and existing information, I refer to that as constructs, so constructions between the two, and the conceptual maps, how the larger bits of information fit together, I refer to as abstractions. Okay, so we have abstractions at the top level, we have constructs in the middle, and we have habits at the bottom. And these are the three bits of learning that we can affect. And so to give you an analogy to hopefully put this together, imagine having a website. So if your brain's a website, the habits are the web pages, the constructs are the hyperlinks between the web pages, so we don't have to record the web page again. We can just link information together. And the abstractions are the site map, that how we can navigate through our filing cabinet. Okay, so what we're trying to get to, and in fact what expertise is having two things. It's about having a really good website or filing cabinet with lots of useful information in there, and it's about having a great site map, a great conceptual map of how that information fits together, so that you can search through it well, you can retrieve information efficiently and effectively. And that's what we're trying to do when we learn. We're trying to have a system that does that. Okay, but that can go wrong, and it can go wrong in lots of different ways. So let's start with one that I was talking about earlier, which is the fight or flight response. So imagine you're getting new information in. Okay, so you're being taught about a subject, and as the lecturer or the teacher is talking to you about that, they mention the word exam. Okay, so that might be fine for a lot of learners, but for you it's not. And if for you it's not because you have had a really bad experience with an exam previously. And so what happens is, as soon as it gets into sensory memory, that triggers an emotional reaction. So you get exam anxiety. Now, that exam anxiety is going to limit, block, and to some extent overload your filing tray. It's gonna use up a lot of your cognitive load. It's gonna affect your physical behavior, but also then extended to that, it's going to affect your ability to mentally function and to learn. Okay, so the point there is your existing experience impacts on your ability to learn in future, and you have to understand that influence in how we go about learning. And the environment more generally influences our programming effectively. So over time, we are becoming significantly different as people because we have significantly different environmental experiences, and they then mean we learn not just because we've got different conceptual understanding, but also because we've got different emotional understanding. Okay, so and I mean a more extreme version that we you know is again you know is thankfully reasonably rare, but is an important factor, is if somebody has something like a trauma. A trauma is a link between episodic memory, so events, and emotions. So again, like the exam anxiety situation, you know, an event or a situation can trigger certain emotional responses, responses which they have limited control over, and lead to, in a lot of cases, irrational behaviors. So there's a real challenge here in how do we manage that interaction that we're having with our environment. And so one of the key principles of maximize our learning fitness is that we need to be able to manage our environmental reaction in terms of our emotions, in terms of our mental and physical interactions with our environment. And to master learning, basically we have to master ourselves. We have to self-regulate. So the question then is, how do we do this? How do we master ourselves? Well, the next pertinent bit of theory is to look at the theory of self-regulated learning. And we can see through this how we may or may not make rational decisions. And there's some key points we've already touched on which are really relevant here. So let me just talk you through the diagram first. So on the left, we get environmental input. So that's information that comes in through sensory input. And what we do when that comes in is we try and make sense of it in terms of what we already know. So we review it based on our existing experience. And from that, we then try and make sense of the world with this new information, and we come up with perceptions, ways of making sense of this new information. We then use those perceptions to plan what we're going to do, and in particular to set expectations, to set goals and expectations on what we're going to do. Then we attempt it, so we perform, and when we perform, we then have a further experience of how we did. So when we come to review again, we can use that to inform our perceptions the next time. So going through that very simply, previous experience informs our current perceptions. Our current perceptions govern our expectations and planning. What we then attempt governs what we achieve, and our achievement affects our experience, which affects our future. Okay, so this is an iterative feedback loop, which can be either positive or negative. And so those that are familiar with Carol Dweck's work on fixed and growth mindset might be triggering at this point, because that's exactly what this is looking at. Okay, so in Dweck's ideas about fixed mindsets, what she's basically saying is that some people fear failure. And so when they fear failure, they put themselves in less threatening situations, and they stretch themselves less. Whereas people with a growth mindset are less fearful of failure and stretch themselves more. So you can see this in the loop. If your previous experience is a bad one, then you're going to set your expectations lower, and you're going to achieve less, and you're going to try and do less in future. If your expectations are things weren't that bad when I failed previously, you will try more, you'll set your expectations higher, and you'll achieve more. So to maximize our learning fitness, the message from here is you need to believe if you want to succeed. And there's also a few other key points that have come out of our discussion so far. So let me just go through those. So the first one is emotions matter, and that they significantly affect our ability to learn. So as we've moved online, one of the key challenges is we don't have anybody with us. So the likelihood of getting frustrated with technology, in fact, I had it this morning when I didn't realize I'd switched something off. So it's very easy for us to get into situations, particularly with technology, particularly online, where we become frustrated because there are barriers there that we don't feel we have control over, that we don't feel we could do something about. And when those situations arise, we have an emotional reaction to it. And that emotional reaction can drive our behavior, and that can, for example, lead to disengagement. So if you want effective online learning, you've got to get rid of things that are frustrating. You've got to minimize learning barriers. So if you're trying to reduce learning barriers in an online sense, then you've got to think about how people learn. And so we've already talked about the emotional response to learning, the need for iterative positive feedback compared to iterative negative feedback. So if you want somebody to do well in an online environment, and you're still sending them messages that that what they're doing is not working, that there are challenges there that they can't overcome, then you're sending them messages of failure, and those messages of failure reinforce. They go through a negative feedback loop and keep on repeating. And what ends up happening is if they become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that they've internalized in their learning the messages that have been sent to them. So if you want to challenge people and you want people to achieve, they have to be in a situation where they can rationalize what is being asked of them and have sufficient capability to potentially overcome the challenges. So in terms of the self-regulated learning feedback loop there, failure is not a problem if you can rationalize that failure is not a problem. Whereas if you can't do that, you internalize failure as a problem. You internalize you as a failure and a problem. Okay, so it's a real issue in terms of how we engage with our learning and how we engage with our learning fitness. You know, so to go back to the physical analogy again, if you go to a physical gym and everybody's working out and everybody's doing really impressive exercises and you're not, and they're able to do certain activities and you're not, what do? You internalize shame. You've got gym shame, and you don't go back. So you know, so we have to be really careful about learning gym shame, particularly online, but also in the classroom. And so that then leads us to a fundamental issue with our current educational systems, which is they've been set up, particularly during the last couple of 100 years, for a model of the economy that was relevant 200 years ago, which is 200 years ago, most people didn't need to be educated because you only need a small amount of people to manage the systems, the societies we lived in. Now, that environment has changed. We're now in a situation where we have an information age where lots of people need to deal with complexity in their day-to-day life and in the workplace. So we need to be better informed, and we need to be able to better deal with that information. We need to learn better. And so having a process for education, which was set up a couple of 100 years ago based on selection, is really not a good way to maximize the amount of learning taking place in society. And so what we need instead is a situation where the most people can learn the most. And for that to occur, we have to focus on progress. We have to focus on how do we maintain and develop learning progress? And we've already know the answer to that. We saw it earlier. You need to have positive feedback loops. So you need to have a situation where as you get learning fitter, you can then make more progress to get learning fit, and you keep going to the learning gym. Okay, so basically we have to shift our philosophy on how we educate. And if not just for that reason, one of the other main reasons we should be doing this is because one of our key motivators in life for everybody is feeling that we have an ability to manage our environment that we're in. So feeling that we have a sense of agency. And that feeling starts very young, and it starts with and persists with our motivation, intrinsic motivation to master what we're doing. And if you want to see an example of this, just look at a child playing with Lego blocks. They will play with them for a period of time, and they will try and build and build things. And if it works and they can build something, they feel a sense of pride and joy with doing that. If they can't, it falls over, they don't feel they can do it, they get frustrated, upset, they disconnect. Okay, it's hardwired into us. And as we go through the educational system, we simply do not consider this enough. We do not consider how individuals are mastering their learning. And this really is the key bit of where personalized learning comes in. The learning at the moment we deliver to people, we provide to people. We don't really think about what they need for their learning. And one of the other things that we need within our learning is socialization. And clearly during a pandemic, in a situation where we're predominantly online, this is very challenging. So our social support networks, our social engagement decreases in a lot of cases. We become more anxious, more isolated, more depressed, because we're not engaging in the way you usually do. We are social creatures. We are designed that way evolutionarily. Okay, so in a traditional situation, you could go to gym classes with other people, and that would be motivating because you're doing it as a group. Okay, so I'm hopefully going to be playing football tonight for the first time in a month and a half, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Why? Well, I enjoy the activity, but I also enjoy being with those other people. So that's great in itself, and it's a really important part of society. So being able to socialize online is a real challenge, and and it's one of the main reasons we need to go back to educating people together in groups. But actually, there's a far more important point that's missed in our education system, which is that if you look at where we are as a society at the moment, everything's getting more complex, and yet we're understanding each other less. We're becoming more polarized. We're not really managing our environment very well. We're not managing ourselves very well. And these factors are amplified by the fact that we're not engaging in social learning. So we're not spending the time reflecting on who we are individually, how we interact with others in groups, how others may see the world differently to us, and we're not changing our perceptions. So when it comes to the self-regulated learning cycle, we're getting input and we're using our own previous experience, but we're not contextualizing that within how others see things. Okay, so it's no wonder in that situation we're becoming more polarized, because we're not spending enough time learning about each other. And I'm just coming to the end of the principles now, and then I'll bring it together. So the last sort of area of learning fitness that's important is about tracking. And this is important because if we want mastery, people need to know they're making progress. So if we can track and understand learning performance, then we can inform and enable learners to track their own performance and to enact change based on it. So many of us now have these physical exercise fitness devices, and we use them to help inform our behaviors, to support how we engage with our physical fitness. And so learning analytics gives us an opportunity to do that for our learning fitness. Although, of course, we need to make sure we're measuring the right things. So one of the big challenges in learning analytics is, what are the right things to measure to give accurate feedback on learning? It's much easier with physical fitness, for example, to measure heart rate or oxygen levels than it is to understand which bits are required within learning. A couple of other observations here, though, is we need to understand the learning, both for the learning analytics, but also for then to make effective decisions on the learning. And the second point is that as we go through educational sectors, we have very, very poor tracking of learning data, of educational data across educational sectors. So you do qualifications and they're used as entrance into the next area, but it doesn't really represent the entirety of your learning. And so learning becomes a very disconnected experience, both within formal education and particularly when linking formal education with non-formal and informal learning. And so we end up in a situation where you can do a lot of learning in life and not go through formal education, or you can do a lot of formal education and not do a lot of learning in life. Okay, and both of those seem a little crazy. We should have something where the learning that you gain is additive. Everything adds together, and we should have a system that interacts and connects those bits together. And I'm currently developing work on that, so happy to discuss that further if you would like. But anyway, let me just bring this together then. So if we look from an analogy of physical fitness, not long ago, doing a marathon in under 2 hours would have seemed impossible. And yet it's been done. And how has it been done? Well, it's been done because the right diet has been consumed. The right tracking was in place. The right social support was in place. There were runners running with the runner. There was expertise developed. They monitored progress at every stage. They removed all possible barriers to achieving the aim. And they self-regulated, the runners self-regulated and managed themselves in the run. Now, we can apply these exact same techniques in our learning, and we can become our own personal trainers. So I'll just finish with some extra information. So these slides I've sent on, so you can access these in your own time. There's a couple of videos here, and I'll just talk about that very shortly in a minute. My books were mentioned, so there is a discount on a 30% discount on the Emerald book at the moment using the code there, Emerald30. So if you are interested, feel free to do that. But let me just finish with talking about IDEA for a minute, because it was touched on in the introduction. So 5 years ago, I was part of a small team that developed IDEA. Now, and it's now one of the world's most successful free educational technologies. So if we've just got, have we got a couple of minutes? I was just going to show a quick video. Let me just show a quick video.
Within the next 20 years, 90% of jobs are going to have a digital element.
It's going to deliver a huge boost to our students' future employability prospects.
It's accessible to everybody, it's really fun, anybody of any age can use it, and it's really important that actually it gives people a recognised award.
It's very, very relevant, and it's very user-friendly.
From a community perspective, IDEA is a fabulous tool.
Learning skills, quite a lot of skills, but it's fun while you're doing it, so you don't mind.
I really like the different badges on offer.
The fact that you can do it from anywhere is pretty mind-blowing.
It's a great challenge. It keeps you on your feet, it refreshes your memory on things you might already know.
I like the variety of badges as well as the varying difficulty in them.
I think my favourite badge is the team worker badge because I've been able to apply it to everyday life and the working environment.
My favourite badge was the gamer badge.
I liked the coder journey. It was difficult, but it was satisfying to finally complete it.
It just makes sense for everybody to complete it, whether you're interested in digital or not.
All apprentices are signed up for it, and now we're rolling it out across all of our staff, and they've really responded well.
We're embracing it here across other faculties as well, so it's going to go university-wide.
Music, art, drama, Duke of Edinburgh Award, the IDEA Award fits nicely in with that programme.
It's been so engaging and different from the usual topics that we study with our students.
IDEA offers me an online toolbox that I can go and access at any time to learn a new skill, and I can take that on and put it onto my CV.
Easy, future-focused,
valuable, informative,
enjoyable,
inspiring,
well worth the
Okay, so that was IDEA. So in the first 5 weeks of lockdown in the UK, over 1 million digital badges were done on IDEA as everybody rushed to go online. And what it shows is that if we design learning right, we are all motivated to learn. You could see how fun and engaging people felt doing that learning was. And if we focus on personalized learning, on removing learning barriers as we did in IDEA, then we can improve our learning fitness. So IDEA is now used in about 95% of all the countries in the world. And there's no reason why we can't use the pandemic as an opportunity to review how we learn and for us to all think about how we can improve our learning fitness. So I'm looking forward now to answering any questions and queries you might have, and thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.